Interchange Digital is pleased to present PARTS, our production and resource tracking system. PARTS is a fully configurable, customizable workflow platform designed to handle the routing, approval, e-signature, storage, and archival of packaging graphics files, related collateral, point of purchase, point of sale, and other printed materials. When combined with SAP's Enterprise Portal, iView architecture, and NetWeaver Java environment, PARTS delivers on the promise of an all-digital, accelerated packaging and graphics workflow for our consumer products and pharmaceutical customers. This simple example of SAP's Enterprise Portal shows how use of iView technology with SAP can combine with Interchange's best-of-breed approach to packaging graphics. This type of interface allows users to have a single sign-on through the Enterprise Portal and into the PARTS software. In this section, we'll look at the job scheduling module. We use the term job to denote a series of tasks or activities performed by internal staff, the supply chain, or a combination. These tasks and activities combine together to create processes and then projects. The project itself might be something simple like the edit of a line of copy on a package, or something very complex like a wave of packages combined with collateral to satisfy a new national promotion. The first thing we'll do in PARTS is log in. I'll type in my name and a password. The job scheduling screen is a key screen for those interested in the individual task related to the overall project. A couple of key features to point out on the screen. One is that there's an icon on the left side that shows you the overall progress. The first one we see is a green check indicating that the step, Project Kickoff Meeting, has been accomplished. The second icon shows that this second task is currently in progress. In other words, the design brief approval process is going on at this time. The calendars represent items that have not begun yet but are scheduled and on track for later. Were the process begin to slip, you'd see individual tasks first turning yellow and then eventually red to show that the process or task was late. At the top of the screen, we see a navigator that lets us jump from project to project, brand to brand, and into other areas in the PARTS system. And then the header shows us the owner of this overall project, the role of that person, and some other information relative to the schedule. We can place the project on hold, or we can look at other details about this project. For example, the History tab, which shows us a detailed audit trail of every individual activity that's taken place in this project. In this brief demonstration, we'll not have time to show every step in the average process, but we do want to show you a couple of key steps that make up the overall project. The first step we'll show is how a user might upload a design brief into the system for others to review. From the scheduling screen, we talked about the second step having steps beneath it. So what I'm going to do is click on the design brief approval process to reveal the steps that are involved in that process itself. Notice the first step is in progress with the green in progress icon, and as a user I have a task in this case to upload the design brief. I'll select to upload, which gives me a screen. I'll browse to browse over to my desktop, and there I'll pick a design brief that I've got here, my great design brief. I choose it and then I click upload. What this does is puts it into the system where I can verify that I've uploaded the proper document. This allows the next users to be notified by email that it's time for them to come in and review the document. Let's assume for the purpose of the demonstration that we've got a little bit of a time lapse here between that original upload of the document and today. If I look to the bottom, I see that the document was originally uploaded. The first user, Creative, accepted it, the second one rejected it, and the third one accepted it. Also notice that 2, 3, and 4, those steps, were all able to approve after the upload. The person who owned the design brief then re-uploaded the design brief, and now we're ready for a second round or a second review cycle. Let's see what that review is like. If I click the review button, it loads the actual file into my web browser and lets me use standard Microsoft Word tools, scrolling, marking up, etc., to look at the document. In this case, I'm going to approve the document, and it asks me to type in my password just to verify that I am the user. Clicking continue, and that finishes my approval. Notice now there's a second green checkbox, an approval check beneath Upload Design Brief. If all three people accept this design brief, that will move us into the next part of the process. In this next section, let's look at tracking milestones. Milestones are those individual tasks that are necessary to accomplish the project. Visibility to those milestones is important both for the owner of the process as well as those involved in the process that can see upstream and downstream from their particular task. This information leads to better decisions on their part as they decide how and when and where to move forward. One screen that we can use to track milestones is the now familiar job schedule screen. If I come look at the job schedule for this process, I see that there are 14 high-level tasks necessary to complete this. We've completed 8 of them, and I see that each of them has been completed on time. I can tell that by the green check mark as opposed to a red check mark. Right now we're at step 9, which is mechanical initiation, and that's usually a very important milestone because it represents the first time, at least in this process, that composed graphics have been routed around the organization for approval. To get more detail on where that particular task is, I'll click on it and it reveals to me that there are 3 different groups, brand, marketing, and legal, looking at this graphic. Brand has rejected it and left some comments that I could read. Marketing has approved it, and now we're up to the legal approval. What each user would do is come in when they got an email and they would click the review button. So let's do that and see what legal would go through to approve this document. This is the basic screen that a reviewer would look at in parts. One of the first things I can see is that others have come in before me and left notes. In each note I can double click on and review the note itself. I can also come up into this column review and double click on each note and read it from this screen. Each note is accompanied with a date and a time, and if it's a multi-page document, what page that particular comment was left on. Now very often a legal user may need to be able to look at the graphic and measure items or look at very small type that's on the graphic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the zoom tool and I'm going to zoom in first at this back panel so that I can read the type there, and then perhaps more often I'm interested in some copy on the nutrition panel. Each time I zoom in it takes 2 or 3 seconds to resolve me to high resolution. Very often legal needs to measure something, so what I'm going to do is measure across the width of the nutrition panel. And I can see that in this case it's a little over 1.652 inches. There are different unit types for different users. There's another feature that's quite handy, not so much to the end customer but to its supply chain. There's a densitometer tool, and what I can do there, for example, clicking on the cracker, is actually see the amount of ink density on the printing press that would be laid in this area of the cracker. Now the supply chain, the printer and often the pre-press supplier, can collaborate way earlier in the process and be able to flag areas that may be difficult to reproduce. This should save the end customer a good deal of money not having to resolve issues at the very back end of the production cycle. Let's close the densitometer tool now and look at some of the other tools that we have in the collaborative online proofing software. One of the things, again, that might be important from the supply chain side is to look at the different colors individually that will go on the printing press. So for example, if I click on Pantone Purple CV, I see the different elements that will be printed in that Pantone color. The comments still show. The comments can be turned on and off, but also I can get this printing production-oriented view of the graphics file. I'm going to go back and look at all the plates, and let's see what an actual legal user might go through to leave an annotation. I'm going to zoom way down in this bottom left-hand corner and I'm going to look at some of the small type on the bottom of the package. Let's say that there's been an error with the year of the copyright. So I'm going to click the grease pencil tool. I'm going to circle that individual element and I'm going to leave a note. We'll type legal, please edit to 1998. Now this is not going to change the underlying graphics file. It's simply a comment by legal that they would like to see that change. And in a more rigorous process, we would go ahead and actually reject this because we know that there's a change that needs to be added. So I'm going to say change year of copyright as marked. Anytime there's a rejection, we want the user to leave a note as to why. That lets somebody, without having to come into the graphics, see what the reasons are. So I'll go ahead and click OK on this, and this synchronizes this with the server, and then verify my user. And that will do it for that legal user. They can continue to review the file, or they can move out into their workspace and pick a new file to begin to review. One of the critical components of PARTS that sits beneath both the online proofing we just looked at as well as the workflow we looked at a little bit earlier is the Digital Asset Library module. When I come into PARTS, I may be a user who quickly wants to find, let's say, a PDF files, and I click File PDF, and I see that there's 14 files found in the system. The user can look at these, they can execute another search. We're recording this in real time, so you can see if I click Search for EPS, in just under 2 seconds, I see that 870 different files were found that match that file name description. Each of the files can be clicked on by clicking the hot link to get more detailed information about that file. I see in this case that this is a Photoshop file, the type, size, date modified, and other information is available, and the site can be configured to store as much custom information as is appropriate for the end client. It can be as few as 2 or 3 fields, or sometimes as many as 20 or 30. I can invite a user to come look at this asset, can add or remove this from a shopping cart so that I could send this file to another place or collect it myself, or I could look at where this asset is stored within the system by looking at what we call the breadcrumb trail or wayfinder at the top. In addition to this particular screen, I can click the List View button and get a list of thumbnails or a text-based list that shows me all of the files in a particular order. This list is also sortable, so I can sort by file size, for example, smallest to largest. I can click again on that action item and go largest to smallest, seeing that there's a 22 megabyte file at the top. And I can also sort by any of these other items, statuses for current and historical, the kind of file, the name. I just clicked on name, and that should give me a sort alphabetically by name, again ascending and descending. Now what we'll do is look at the cart function. I've added some of these elements to a cart, so we're going to go up to the cart and see what we can do with files once they're placed into the shopping cart. Using the cart is a relatively straightforward process. By going into the cart, I can see that I currently have 12 files in the shopping cart. There are some options on the left side. One is to list carts. Carts can have multiple carts, and the carts are saved after you log out. They're called session persistent, meaning that if you collect a group of files in the system and you want to give them out on a regular basis, Parts will store that set of files for you in a cart that you can name yourself. This particular cart is a primary cart. It's the one that was loaded when I launched the system, and the one that I was adding files to a moment ago. Removing a file is as simple as going to the file and clicking on the little red arrow leaving the shopping cart, and that throws that file out of the cart. I can do that with another file here. This leaves me with 10 files. Now I can order these on CD. If I'm trying to get these fulfilled, I could have them shipped out same night, Federal Express. If we receive an order and we're hosting the site by 5 p.m., we'll have them in FedEx that night. Regardless, you can also order these files by email, or you can order them over the web and have them delivered to your desktop immediately. That's the type example that I'll look at right now. So I'm going to click Order via Web. Once I've clicked on the Order via Web button, there are a couple of choices I can make. If I'm on a Macintosh, I can click Retain Macintosh Resources. And this makes the file double clickable on a Macintosh and lets it open in the right application even after passing the file on the web. In this case, I'm going to zip all the files. That means I'm going to compress the files before they're sent to me back on the server, and that will make the transfer a little bit quicker and easier. So I'll click Zip All Files. If I look down at the list, I see that Parts has found all of the files. That gives me a message that all of the order files will be complete. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Order via Web. It provides me with a clickable download zip icon, and when I click that, it's going to bring that zip file right down to my desktop. And I'll unzip the files, and this shows me a list of all the files that we had placed in that particular order. I'm going to close this view of files and go back, and I can see the results of the order. Let's move back in our shopping cart, and then I'm going to look at a couple other features of the asset management library. One of the things we can do with parts is use parts to distribute pertinent information into the sales chain who may be communicating imagery and sales points back into retail. So let's execute a search for those PDFs once again. And let's say that this particular Hacker Cracker package is something that I'd like to introduce to a retail customer. I've got a preview that's a larger image, and I may want to drop this into a PowerPoint presentation, for example. So in parts, I simply go to the preview screen. I can drag and drop this file directly into PowerPoint, and within PowerPoint, the salesperson can resize the graphic, rotate it, and they didn't have to go through the trouble of putting things into a cart. This is a quick way to distribute low-res graphics into users like salespeople that don't need the high-resolution graphics and may not even be deeply involved in the approval process, but nonetheless want to have the ability to send, receive files, particularly in low resolution. So this concludes at least a relatively brief overview of the three major functional modules within parts. Remember in the beginning we looked at the job schedule and these high-level tasks associated. We showed that we could drill down into processes and sub-processes, many layers deep as we need to go to look at a particular process. We then moved into a mechanical review process where end users can come into the system, they can highlight various areas of the graphics and leave notes with the graphics. And we saw how we can execute file searches based on different file criteria, find files, add them to a shopping cart, go to that cart, and send, order the files, or in other ways distribute them. From the home page, which can be customized, there is an online user's guide. What I can do with the user's guide is click. The help file loads, and there is a full index along the left-hand side. I can click on any area and get detailed information about that area of parts, explaining the buttons, the functions, and all the different elements that a user may need to know about parts. Now, our intention is not that each user needs to know this. An administrator may need to know these items to explain it to the user, or an advanced user may get stuck in a particular area. But most users can use the site without reading the documentation at all. Most users may have between a half an hour and an hour of training, particularly approval users, that parts may not be the core of their daily function. Let's go back to the parts interface. And let's look at a couple of advanced features. There are some searches. A file search which has a number of criteria that we can look for files by based on size, application type, keywording, etc. We also have the ability to create a search by building one. So this particular search has name contains PDF, a keyword, and we can continue to add additional criteria to the search so that we can look for various elements within the parts system. There is also a workspace functionality. In the workspace, I can look for tasks that are assigned to this particular user. If I'm a project owner, I may have various projects in different stages. I see that some are late and scheduled, on time, etc. And each of these from the workspace I can click on and drill down into that more detailed job schedule view that we were looking at earlier. The workspace is really meant as a quick way to look at what's on my plate. I may not be interested in everybody else and what's going on with them. I may be very task oriented, want to look at project name, the due dates, how much time is remaining, and that type of thing. It's really type of a dashboard review for task owners. There is a set of reports that comes with parts, and we build a number of reports for our customers very specific to the metrics that they're looking to measure by. And then there's an Explore tool that lets us build out a hierarchy that is based on the naming conventions within the organization. So you see this particular fictitious company had 3 original areas for approvals, assets, and projects. The assets themselves are subdivided into administrative category, Canada, Europe, and US. And then even within US, there's an image library for corporate imagery, merchandising, and packaging. And again, the number of layers here and all of the wording we're able to configure per customer. That about wraps it up, and you've been a very patient listener, at least that's my assumption. What I'm going to do now is take you out and give you some information on how to contact Interchange Digital should you be interested in parts or have further questions. This final screen shows how you might contact us for more information. You can visit us on the web at www.interchangedigital.com, or you can reach us by phone by calling Doug Enda at 847-296-5318 or Mark Bradford at 847-296-5045.